Sure, go ahead. Um,
Alrighty.
hey, all right. Let's do this. Do I want this? I'll do it this way. Um, okay. Luke's at the bottom. All right, now I feel good. All right. Oh,
Or like the
things right in
Brady
a row.
Bunch.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so yeah, it is actually weird for me that people here on time. It's just like not quite common for me. So, all right. So I guess I'll just get started without like on a long preamble. All right. Well, hello all. This is a small council which we have 9 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you really want to support this community, right? If you want to support that channel, hit that join button and become a member, a YouTube member, and support this content that we give to you daily. So help us out that way. So we have an amazing group of individuals we're going to introduce. I'm like actually super excited. This is a bit different from what we usually do. We'll start with Jessica Gonzalez. Hello, hi, Jessica.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. It's nice to meet you and see you, like well, in digitally in person. Um, uh, Tell the world about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Jessica Gonzalez. I'm a former Blizzard and Activision employee. I started working on a lot of activism in the games industry, and yeah, that's what I'm here to talk about today is the games industry and a lot. There's a lot of stuff to cover. Just happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Next, we have Josh Miller. Josh Miller, also equally as excited to have you here, right? Josh, please tell a little about yourself.
Also happy to be here. Also a former Activision Blizzard employee. Got my start in QA. Eventually made my way over to the broadcast side on the esports world of the Overwatch and Call of Duty leagues. And now I'm here. Happy to be here.
Okay, okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right. Um, and not so erudite. Have only had her here a few times in the past, but I feel like she's made like a really big impression. So I'm happy you're back, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm doing good. How are you?
Fine. Yeah, tell me what about yourself.
Sure. So I'm more of a kind of mental health, social, cultural streamer. I've got my degree in psychology and a graduate diploma in psychometry, and I'm also a licensed addictions counselor. I'm going to grad school for clinical psych. So psych is kind of my thing, which the mental health piece, I think, of today's conversation is going to be kind of my major contributor here.
Thank you. All right. Next, we have the Turk, a good guy who's been on my panels quite a few times, right?
Yep.
And aggravated me. We've aggravated each other, I think. But Turk is always welcome here in this community. Turk, tell a little about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Turk. I actually am a professional hardware developer, so I deal more with the actual consoles. And behind me is actually a nude of the Xbox 360. So I had my hands on doing that as well as the PlayStation 3 and all that fun stuff. So been in corporate development for a long time. Really interested to hear what some of the former Activision employees have to say because knowing how some of the corporate lifestyle works as a professional developer, I have other opinions, but interested in the conversation.
Okay. And last but not least, we have our good friend Wick, Death of Certainty. What did your kid appear? Turk? Yeah. All right. I can take you off screen if you want me to hide whatever you're doing, so it's easier. All right. You can just it's your off screen, buddy. Um, so Death of Certainty, Wick, buddy. Tell a little about yourself.
Sure. If you've seen Prime streams, you probably know who I am already. I tend to come on and give my opinions on political matters. I do have experience from the consumer side of the gamers industry. When I lived in Wichita, one of my friends actually driven deep into debt, was put on some mailing lists that predatory companies used to target him. He became addicted to loot boxes, gambling in games, and things like that. He lost his house, he lost his job. He worked at Boeing, to be clear. He was making a good amount of money. He lost his wife, he lost his kids, and it was a terrible, terrible time. But I have seen firsthand the effects of the predatory nature of these types of games, and that's what I'm here to mostly talk about is how we can deal with that side of things.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Okay, great. I'm really excited to talk to this group of people. Turk, let me know when you're ready. I'll put you back on screen.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Great, great, great. Um, all right. So yeah, let's talk about today's prompt. I would think I'd have it pulled up. I had a bunch of time to have it right in front of me, but I don't. So it is. I'll put it up here. Uh, okay. Yeah, there is. The video game industry has exploded in influence and revenue, but it's done so off the backs of developers and gamers. Major publishers have been accused of labor violations and sexual harassment. An example of this is the crunch culture, in which employees are supposed to work vast amounts of overtime near a game's launch to get the product out the door. This comes with the sacrifice of the health of the workforce, but non-compliance will eventually mean termination. Furthermore, publishers have embedded addictive game mechanics such as loot boxes to squeeze more profit out of gamers. What is the effect? What is the effect of all this on the mental health of game industry's workforce and customers? Is this industry becoming increasingly toxic? Does it require government intervention in the form of regulation? And do you think the public could/should respond if the industry is in fact a detriment? Okay, yeah. I have talked about this topic a whole bunch, and I'm actually really, really pumped because it's something that I'm quite passionate about. The things that the game industry gets into. So we're going to do opening statements, right? So you'll give your opening thoughts, right? For spend like 2 minutes or so, giving opening thoughts, and then we'll move on. So we'll start with Jessica. What are your opening thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, opening thoughts. I am very passionate about talking about, labor type things in the games industry. I've worked at Activision where crunch culture is very heavily relied upon. So it's something that's really close to me. I've watched friends, suffer physically, mentally over crunch culture and things like that. And I just wish that we had more visibility into that part of game development because I feel like game development is kind of secretive where we don't really show consumers how games are made. And, you have all these devs who have couches in their offices so that they can sleep. And it's just like they have zero work-life balance. And I feel like the end product would be so much better if crunch was not existent or if there was more protections around crunch. And wages as well in the games industry is very low. I actually recently left games to go into tech, and like my pay went up significantly. And I just feel like with these multi-million-dollar companies, and especially the sale of Activision Blizzard to Microsoft, it's kind of a slap in the face towards developers. And I just want to kind of shine a light on these type of practices and hopefully create some change across the industry. And that's really why I'm here and what I'm passionate about with this talk and future projects.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, everyone's moved around on my screen many times. All right, so we'll just go to Wick. Wick, please.
Okay. So yes, there, especially in recent years, there have been a rise in predatory practices towards consumers by game companies. Forbes released a report in 2014 that showed that about 50% of revenue from mobile games on your cell phone, gotcha games, as I think they're referred to colloquially, are made by about 0.15%, so less than a percent of their users make up 50% of the revenue of these kind of corporations. And this is also apparent in more PC-based games that have loot boxes and microtransactions, as they're called. The Pareto effect shows that about 20% of your input into a system makes up 80% of the outcome, roughly. And this extends downwards. So out of that 80% or out of that 20% of input, 20% of that input makes up 80% of that. And it goes again till we have these wild discrepancies. Again, 0.15% making 50% of the revenue. This causes game companies to target specifically people who have addictive personalities and large incomes and then rake them over the coals for as much as they can. They get into death spirals financially and there's really no way out for a lot of them. They come into there's no help. The game provides no support. There's no incentive for these games to off ramp people like this, and they have every incentive to seek out to target. And they specifically, again, I know this from personal experience, put you on lists that other game companies and stuff will seek you out and target you specifically because they know you're willing to spend a large amount of money, and it's a terrible practice, and it needs to be stopped.
Wix, just really quick to interject, there's actually a name for that group of people. They're called whales.
Yeah, whales is the technical term. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Technical term. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. Let's next. Let's go to Josh, please.
Yeah, so to kind of hop on what Wick said, I don't think it's any secret that these companies know exactly what they're doing when they target the whales. I have a friend who, I won't name because he's a great project manager, and he's not like the person responsible for these decisions, but he used to work at a company called Jam City where they work on casino games, Facebook games, the exact type of games that are targeting the target demographic that you're talking about. And they absolutely go for the most vulnerable, generally people in the age demographic of 70 or up, people who just spend a significant amount of time on their PCs on these online games, and they know, they know what they're doing, and they know that these are the people who are most likely going to spend the most money because they either have disposable income that they, that they're just going to spend on these types of games, or in some cases that they don't, that they're using whatever pennies that they do have just because, these are addictive games, and a lot of these people are probably bored. So they know exactly what they're doing, and it's pretty disgusting.
Okay, Dirk.
Yeah, so I actually feel a lot of the same sympathies that y'all are saying about some of the microtransaction, loot box, gambling behaviors in these games, because as a gamer, I like to play games, not necessarily spend money inside of my game. I want to enjoy story, characters, combat, all that kind of stuff. But what I'm more interested in hearing in this conversation is some of the more nuance when it comes to some of the labor practices. Jessica mentioned it earlier. I'm a professional developer as well. I've gone through many cycles of crunch, but I've also gone through many cycles of non-crunch. So I have a feeling a lot of the conversation gets a little overblown towards a certain end of the spectrum, where in reality there is a bit more balance to the development life cycle. And then going to Josh, you mentioned QA testing. There's contract labor. There's all sorts of different types of employees that are involved in the development process of a service or a game. So again, I think a lot of this is overblown due to the types of people that are being heavily impacted. But yes, I do believe all developers should be paid more because they're providing a value and service that is making the games that make a lot of the money. So I sympathize, and I really think people should be getting paid more for their efforts.
Thank you. Erudite.
Yeah, I don't think I need to be super long. It seems like they've got like industry predatory consumer practices are pretty toxic, and it's treating its staff like shit. So that's not great. As far as government regulation, when it comes to addiction, we have regulated addictive providers in the past, like tobacco and alcohol companies, and how they can target certain individuals. So it's probably worth considering what that looks like, particularly with things like adolescents who are maybe stealing parents' credit cards and things like that as well. So yeah, I won't give much more than that. I think it's all been kind of well said.
Okay, open to the panel.
So when we talk about these predatory behaviors, do we want to focus more on like the mobile games, the casino games that y'all were talking about for Facebook, or are we wanting to talk more on the loot box aspect inside of these more AAA style games that are may or may not be as addictive or as impactful, but they both equally bring up more funds? So it's like I'm really interested in which realm of the gaming sphere we want to talk about on that one.
I'm curious why we have to separate it. I understand it's there's matters of degrees here. Obviously, not all games who practice microtransactions are as harmful as other games. However, I think that when it comes down to it, like for the purposes of the discussion, Erudite brought up government regulations. I think we've all can recognize here that it's happening to different degrees on different platforms. I guess the question in my mind, at least that I'm interested in, is okay, we know it's happening, so what do we do about it? Um, when we talk about regulation, uh, I am generally not in favor of over-regulating things. I think that could be equally harmful to the consumer base. But again, as Erudite mentioned, we've done this before in other industries, especially when it comes to targeting minors. So there is a place, I think, for some regulation. I know in I think in China and other countries, a lot of these games, one of the regulations the government places on these is they have to have a mercy system, is what they call it. So if you buy, I don't know, 100 loot boxes, you're guaranteed to get a certain result. But it's still, even with that in place, the amount of money it takes to hit the mercy system is it's wild. There's no price control on that. I don't know if there should be, but there's very little recourse I think that the government has to at least so far that they've utilized to kind of bring things back. But yeah.
And if I could jump in, I also kind of think that the issues are one, and they're more related than I think we give them credit for at times. I think these practices started with the sort of Jam City games, the casino-based games that target the older audience. But then I think they the suits at these companies kind of saw how effective they were, and then those practices trickled down into the mainstream games that I think we all play. I don't really play Facebook casino games, but we see some of those practices trickle into games like Overwatch with loot boxes, Call of Duty, pretty much everything these days. And while it might not be as impactful on the typical middle schooler or high schooler now, I think that instilling those values and behaviors in them at an early age is probably not great and will probably have long-term ramifications. And I think that as far as a solution, I don't know if government regulation is like the end all be all. I think that there's certainly avenues there that can be explored. But I also think there's stuff that we can do on the dev side too. I think that this goes hand in hand with efforts to unionize the industry as a whole, because once the workforce has more of a say over the products that they create, then we have more, we'll be able to like look at these things and be like, no, we don't want to do this. We don't want to make games like this, because most devs don't. Most devs are forced to, and they have no desire to make mechanics like that. They just want to design good games. So I think the more say that we have at the higher level when it comes to the games that we make, that's also a solution.
I guess I have a
Yeah.
question. I'm not deeply familiar with the gaming industry from like an internal perspective, and I know that Jessica and Josh, you guys are kind of our resident experts from within that world. When it comes to predatory consumer practices, I'm curious about what type of specific things, if you're able or willing to share, you have or haven't seen. Specifically, I'm concerned about, right, if we're noticing certain types of users and then sharing those users' information with other companies or other projects within the same company to aggressively target them with multiple games and multiple systems and stuff like that. I don't know what predatory behavior is actually being done, other than they're putting them on a variable ratio so that they get addictive. Is there anything other than that going on?
I specifically wasn't like too close with those kind of things. I did work on like a mobile game that had a gacha system, and it was just kind of like, oh, we're gonna, put this thing in the game, and devs really were like, sure, but then regulation kind of started happening, so we had to start like putting the odds there on the screen to where you could see it, or else like the game would be, the app store would reject it. Those are the only things that I had noticed, but yeah, I didn't work super close with like the decision making or anything. As QA, you're kind of just told to show up and do work, and you don't really get a say in that kind of stuff, or you don't really get to see behind the scenes. You just kind of see, people walking in, and sometimes they would invite whales to the studio and show them things, or like pay YouTubers to play the game on their show, and kind of it just didn't feel right. And we would express that it didn't feel right, but it's just those things that kind of happen, and you don't really get a say in them. I don't know,
Yeah,
Josh, if you.
Yeah, I mean, likewise, I was never in the room when any of these conversations were taking place. It's all just kind of hearsay. Word would come from marketing or some executive that this would have to be implemented for monetization, and then it would get implemented. And
What would be
I went to
this?
school. What's
Sorry, just
that?
to clarify, when you say this has to be implemented, what would that look like? Like, what would be implemented?
It would just be finding ways to monetize an element of a game beyond just, when you purchase a game right out for like $60. Now corporations, they need more than that. So a microtransaction might be linked to a loot box that you have a 5% chance of getting when you purchase that loot box. Honestly, it's probably lower than 5% chance.
And another mechanic that's used a lot is like time savers, stat boosters, temporary XP
Yep.
boosts, that
The
sort of
wins.
thing. And that stuff gets integrated at like the design phase before even many of these lower level developers actually start to go ahead and create that stuff. They build the framework for the game, and it's like this mechanic has a way we can monetize, and that's where the high level developers and the marketing team need to read the room when it comes to their the gamers in the marketplace and be like, we don't need to squeeze them for money here. We can get money from cosmetics and that sort of thing. Because it seems like more people are okay with cosmetics, not necessarily loot boxes or all these like pay to win kind of things.
Well,
So, oh,
they weren't always,
Right.
in favor of the, like the famous Horsheimer, right, controversy.
Yep.
So like we've evolved, like, okay, this is fine. But I liked what you were saying, Turk, in terms of these mechanics were built in like from the very start, right?
Yep.
Like they aren't when people think about this, people who aren't detractors, not strong detractors like I am, right? They look at, well, it's optional, right? So the time saver aspect you talked about, and Erida, I'm not sure how familiar you are with this, right? But with certain games, well, what they'll do is like you'll be building something, right? Like I need to create like stuff, right? And at first it'll be created like instantly, right? But as you upgraded it, it'll like, okay, for a minute, it'll take a minute long, then 5 minutes, then
Yeah.
10 minutes.
I wasted a lot of time on Merge Dragon, so I know all about that.
Okay, all right, so you do know, yeah,
Or grinding levels to make progress to get past a artificial barrier that the game itself puts up to either force you with grinding or paying more money.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna.
these, I just wanted to finish this thought. That yeah, it's not. Yes, you can not engage with any of the mechanics, the monetization mechanics. You can, but you can also, and by that token, you can also have a less enjoyable experience with the game, right? Like built into it is the idea with these like different currencies they have as well, right? Is the idea that you will engage. If not, you are being punished for not engaging. But Wick, you want to say something?
Sure. I'm gonna post a link in the private chat, and I'll post it in Twitch too. It's a YouTube video. It's from the 2016 Pocket Gamer Connects Helsinki. I guess they had a trade show where the CEO of a corporation called Tribe Flame, he talks. He gave a presentation on. It's called Let's Go Whaling, and he describes and kind of teaches the people the tactics that these companies use to specifically target whales and to, again, let's go whale hunting, let's go whaling is what it's called. So I'll post that there. But again, I don't have experience on the industry side, but on the consumer side, I have seen, again, my friend who worked at Boeing, he made a lot of money. He was specifically targeted, put on mailing lists, and they actively hunted him. I don't know which corporations did that. This was about 5 years ago this happened, so I can't give you that information. But from firsthand experience, I've seen, well, I guess secondhand since I saw it through him. But I'm letting you know this happens.
And was that
Yeah.
the
Let
same
me post a
company
link.
targeting him over and over?
No,
Was this a
different companies,
spreading
different
his
companies.
information?
Yep.
So
The
okay,
like when he signed up with his email or whatever,
yeah.
it would be distributed to other companies who would reach out to him specifically. And I had played a couple of the same games he was playing because, again, we were friends. I didn't receive those emails. I didn't receive that kind of attention from these people. So it wasn't just like a mass distribute there. There was some sort of system in place that specifically put him in some sort of category where they hunted him. But yeah, I'll post those links right now.
Yeah,
I
thanks for
was
sharing.
go no, Jess, go ahead. Jessica, please.
Oh no, I was just gonna say like I don't have experience with that specifically, but thank you for sharing that. I definitely want to watch that. But I will say that companies will, you know, not outright call it pay to win or gambling or what have you, but they will create their own type of currency so it doesn't look like you're spending real money, right? Like you just buy points or you buy like diamonds or whatever they design to be the currency, and so it's easier for you to justify spending, you know, that versus like real money. So you just, and then I don't know, it's just weirdly designed in my opinion. I don't agree with it personally. Like I like cosmetic stuff because you always know what you're getting and you're like, okay, I'm gonna buy this, it looks cool, instead of like I'm gonna roll the dice and see what I get. And yeah, I don't personally agree with loot boxes or any the like, but I do know that like whales is an industry term and they are targeted in that like they'll invite people to the studio, kind of try and like, you know, look at all the cool stuff we do. We work on video games, and don't you like our game? And you want to talk about it on YouTube? And you know, I wouldn't be surprised if they have like a network where they, you know, show whales to other companies. But on the game dev side, there's a network that shows, you know, what devs are cool with crunch, what devs are hard to work with, and there's a blacklist. So I don't know if that translates directly, but there is definitely like whisper networks within the games industry, so I wouldn't be surprised.
And what's funny is when you're in the development world, it's shocking just how small the world is, right? Because
It is
people
very.
from Activision sometimes go over and work at other companies, and it's like I'm a, you know, I'm not in the same industry. I'm kind of parallel, but it's like I know a whole bunch of people that work up at AMD. I know a whole bunch of people that work at Apple. I know a whole bunch of people that work at Intel. So it's like it's a revolving door of the same people, and it's just like we all kind of know what each other's working on. But I would imagine with software development, it's a more accessible trade to get into, and there's a broader amount of people that probably are good at that kind of stuff. So I imagine it's a bigger pond, but still you see the same names going around different developers.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm actually curious, Turk, though. When you were talking about these design elements, these negative design elements, you said developers need to push back. But do developers have any power to do so? Right? Like as Jessica and Josh were saying, you know, the decision comes down, and you know it's got to be done. That's I mean they're the heads. They're the ones where the money comes from. So how do you push back as developers,
So,
especially
so
if you're not unionized?
yeah, so I won't speak to the unionization thing because I don't think it applies to this question, but it all really comes down to like seniority, right? If you were to go to your senior developer in your division and you go and tell him, hey man, I really think this, you know, pay to win scheme that we're trying to implement is a bad choice. You know, how do we voice that concern to upper management in order to pull it back, tone it down, or get rid of the feature outright? Because at some point as a developer, these choices impact how a game is received globally as well as from the reviewers. So like Cyberpunk 2077, terrible game at launch, definitely had its bugs and issues, but it's like the senior developers still wanted to ship the game, and they had plenty of pushback from the corporate side. But it's like we need more senior leadership and development saying this thing's not done and I don't stand by what y'all are going to be shipping. And at that point, they either leave or you know, we need more skin in the game.
What
But
can I ask you,
right.
the Turk? What incentive would a senior developer have in that case? Like, I just don't see an incentive for them to do so because even games like Cyberpunk that shipped terribly still made a ton of money.
Yeah, but they've dealt with over a year of negative press and blowback, and there's been court cases and stuff. So it's like the developers know that it's not a good product. Would you put your name on this product? They need to stand by that, and actually push back on the corporate needs. I've done it several times in my hardware development. Plenty of bugs on this board. There's a reason why I've got this version, because there are issues, and it's like, do we fix the issues or do we just put a Band-Aid on it? And at that point, you need leadership that says, we don't want Band-Aids, we want fixes.
And if I could
But
jump in here,
Josh, please.
yeah, it's tough because I've seen it happen so many times at Activision in particular, where the people at the bottom will voice their concerns. It'll go up to middle management, eventually reach top management, and the top dogs they're just not willing to take risks. They're not willing to put their jobs on the line. They're scared. They're scared of people like Bobby Kotick and the C-suite just replacing them. Because at the end of the day, we all know we're very expendable. And I've just seen, I think it's the lack of the willingness to take risks is ultimately killing these companies. No one is willing. Like, they're just not. And
Or they're
Why?
taking the wrong risks.
or they're
What-
taking the wrong risks.
What is inborn in this culture that, like, like I think about unionizations, right? I've worked in more like mental health care, where with unionizations, we have space to kind of speak up. Now there's whole issues with unionizations because our union barely represents us very well, and soaks up a lot of money. But what is like leading to this, right? Like, I remember, like, even as a pretty like low down person, I spoke up all the time about like standard issues. I raised it with my managers and like mobilized people behind me. Now I was a pretty small face, but like, what is happening in the culture that is keeping everyone silent, right? Because the problem is that like everyone's silence is making this all complicit.
Honestly, I don't even think it's silence. We're all speaking up. Like, everyone on my team was speaking up. Everyone I know was like voicing their opinion and making it very heard. It was just the people who needed to hear it were not listening. They would listen, and then they would come up with excuses for why our feedback was not being implemented.
I feel like a profit motive is a huge part, though. Like, I imagine if you're a dev, especially if you're a senior dev, you're motivated for your game to do well. Particularly, you're motivated for your game to be successful and to make a lot of money, because then you get to make more games. Stakeholders are going to like that stuff, right? And so, say practices like loot boxing or promoting to whales, I feel like that would be inherently reinforced within the culture. Are devs actually like taking issue with this, or is it actually that, to be honest, makes your game look better if you're making more money?
Yeah. So, Jessica will be back soon. Yeah, it's something I wanted to jump in on. Like, what Turk? You're saying like this is developers need to tell management this is a bad idea, but in what way is it a bad idea? I think Cyberpunk is like a extreme example, right? But for most games, right, if the goal is to make more money and that technique is effective, right, well then it's not a bad idea to the execs. It's not a bad idea to the stockholders, right? It's not a bad idea to C-suite when they report their earnings. That's all good, and most games aren't pushed back on for that. Cyberpunk specifically was just like it was rushed out the door, and that's like a kind of a separate issue. In fact, that's actually more on the crunch side, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of monetization, right? It just kind of makes sense that why not? Why not have a mechanic that extends monetization past the point of sale, right? What it works.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So as a developer, right? So I'll just take Diablo 3's real money auction house, right? It was a bad idea from concept, but for whatever reason, the C-suite thought, oh, hey, let's start flowing real money through the game instead of going through all this other stuff. You go and look at all the community message boards, and they're like, oh, this is going to be bad. This is going to be terrible. Then you look at the actual rollout of the feature, and it's like, as a developer, you have to be able to understand kind of how your feature is implemented, how it integrates into the larger scheme of things. And that's why, again, we need more senior level developers that have skin in the game and that are willing to push these type of development practices out of existence, because we need to get back into the making of games, not of making money printers.
But the problem with that, as I see it, again, this is just from the consumer side. So industry side, take what I say with a grain of salt. That's what I'm saying. But I see these games being rushed out. I see these games having terribly implemented systems, yet they still rake in a lot of money. And again, if management overrides these decisions because they know even if the game has massive amounts of bugs, even if the game isn't perfect at launch, they can still make a ton of money by releasing it as soon as they can. And again, there are outliers here. There are examples we can pull up where it backfired, and that's fair. But again and again and again, I see these practices. I see these mechanisms being put more and more into games. And as a player, I am losing my ability to participate in the games I used to love. I am losing my ability to find games where I can afford to get I can't afford to play a free to play game anymore, you know? And that's weird to me. Free to play games will cost you hundreds and hundreds of dollars, whereas it used to be I could just pick it up for $60 and I'd be done. I'd have all the content, maybe a couple DLCs here and there. But it's just I don't see an off ramp to this from the I don't know. Maybe I'm doomer pilled on this. I don't know.
So looking at it from the consumer side, right? So you follow a bunch of channels, you do a bunch of reporting, you listen online and stuff. What we need is more vocal opposition to this, right? I know we're 6 people here on a panel, but as the community starts to not like certain things, Battlefield 2042, for example, the player base has dropped significantly to a point where they're thinking of changing that to a free-to-play game in order to get people back. So it's like